Okay, so um, we've all kind of glanced at our horoscopes at some point, haven't we? You
Yeah.
know, just for fun. But today, let's maybe try to like ditch those Mercury's in retrograde explanations and really dive deep into this idea of like your birth as a cosmological
A
snapshot.
cosmological snapshot.
Imagine
Cool.
instead of like a photo booth picture, it's the entire universe capturing its energy at the exact moment, you were born.
Wow,
It's kind of wild, right?
that is a pretty wild thought, yeah.
So that snapshot, that's kind of what a natal chart tries to visualize, right?
Yeah.
With all the planets and signs and houses and
Yeah, you could say that. And it's not just about like, oh, here's where the planets were when you were born. It's more about this idea that like every single moment in the universe is totally unique.
okay.
Like a fingerprint, right? No two are exactly alike. So your birth, it's this totally singular event happening in a specific time and place in this like constantly moving cosmos.
So like my cosmic fingerprint.
Exactly. And the positions of all those celestial bodies at that very moment, they kind of imprint this unique energetic signature on, well, yeah.
Okay, so I kind of get that, but then there's this whole thing about like how Mars being in a certain position makes you ambitious or whatever, and that's always felt a little like far out there for me.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that attributing like specific personality traits to individual planets, it can
Mm.
seem a little arbitrary.
Hmm.
And to be honest, not everyone who's really into astrology even interprets it in that super literal way.
So if it's not about saying, oh, you're going to be a CEO because of where Saturn is, what is it about? I've heard people talk about this guy, Carl Jung, and his ideas connected to astrology. What's that all about?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Jung was this like super influential psychologist, and he came up with this concept of archetypes.
Archetypes.
Yeah, basically, they're these universal patterns of human experience that you see everywhere across all these different cultures throughout history.
Hmm.
Like, think about those classic character types, the hero, the villain, the wise old sage.
Right.
Those archetypes, they represent these kind of like fundamental energies or patterns in the human psyche.
Okay, so instead of saying Venus makes you romantic, are we saying Venus is more like the archetype of love and beauty and connection?
You're getting closer to it.
Yeah.
It's not that Venus is literally sending out like love vibes or anything, but it might represent those broader archetypal themes.
Okay, so it's not that the planets are like controlling us. It's more like they're reflecting these bigger energies and patterns that are already out there.
Exactly. And that's kind of how some people see this whole Mercury retrograde thing too.
Oh, so instead of Mercury like directly causing all this chaos, it's more about those trickster energies just being more active during that time.
Right. It's a different way of looking at it, less about literal cause and effect and more about understanding the potential energy and patterns that are already at play.
Man, this is really making me think. So if it's not about the planets like dictating our destiny, then where does that leave us? Like how does this whole cosmic fingerprint idea actually show up in our lives? So
Mm.
we're not like puppets being controlled by the planets, right? It's more like there's this subtle give and take between those cosmic energies and our own lives. Like think about the moon's gravity and how it affects the tides. It's
Yeah.
not like the moon is controlling the ocean or anything, but it's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
So maybe it's kind of like that with other cosmic forces too. Like they could be subtly influencing us in ways that we don't even realize.
That's a really good analogy. It really gets at this idea that we're all part of this like massive interconnected system.
Right.
Like in nature, where everything is connected and influencing everything else. Our lives are probably also intertwined with these like bigger cosmic rhythms.
Yeah. So instead of getting caught up in this idea of fate or destiny, it's more about understanding those energies and using that knowledge to navigate our lives in a more informed way, I guess.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing those moments of synchronicity too. Those weird coincidences that seem almost impossible, but maybe they're not just flukes.
Hmm.
Maybe they're actually like meaningful reflections of those deeper patterns that are at play.
Okay. But we got to address the elephant in the room here, maybe the skeptic in the observatory or something. Because a lot of people want proof, right? Like hard scientific evidence.
Right.
And from what I've heard, that's where things get a little, well, murky.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. The scientific community, they haven't exactly embraced astrology as this like legitimate field of study.
Mm.
And it's true that astrology doesn't really offer the kind of like hard evidence that you find in physics or chemistry.
Okay.
Like you can't just measure the energy of Mars with a scientific instrument.
Right. So does that mean this whole cosmic fingerprint idea is more like a philosophical thing than like a real scientific system?
Well, not necessarily. Sometimes the most profound truths about being human, they don't come from microscopes or telescopes. Sometimes they come from metaphors and stories.
Okay.
And that's kind of where astrology could be really insightful.
Metaphors. So you're saying these astrological interpretations, they're more symbolic than literal.
Think about it. We use metaphors all the time to understand these like big, complicated ideas. We talk about falling in love or
Yeah.
finding our place in the world.
Right.
Those aren't literal events.
Right.
Like nobody literally falls into love,
Mm-hmm.
but they still tell us something true about our emotions and experiences.
Mm.
And astrology, it's kind of like that too.
So can you give me an example? Like with Venus, instead of it being just a planet, how can we see it as something more?
It's not that Venus is literally like beaming romance down at us,
Yeah.
but it can be this really powerful symbol for those universal forces of attraction and connection and beauty.
Okay.
All those things that draw us to each other and make our lives richer. Just like the moon doesn't control our moods, but it cycles, they can kind of mirror our own internal rhythms, our own emotional ups and downs.
So maybe instead of thinking of astrology as this like rigid system that predicts the future, it's more helpful to see it as a framework for self-reflection, like a way to understand ourselves and the patterns in our lives a little bit better.
That's it, exactly. It's about realizing that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves, this like vast and incredible universe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, just maybe by understanding those cosmic energies that were there at our birth, we can get a whole new perspective on our place in it all.
So it's less about astrology like predicting the future and more about it showing us these cosmic energies that were there when we were born and how those might be playing out in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like here's exactly what's going to happen. It's more like here are some of the energies that might be influencing things. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
Like we've got this map, but instead of leading to buried treasure, it's more like it's pointing us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves.
I really like that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's like any map, that doesn't force you to go a certain way. We still get to choose our own path. We can decide how we want to work with those energies.
This has been a trip, let me tell you. We started out kind of iffy about horoscopes. Now we're talking about cosmic blueprints and stuff.
It's pretty cool, right? Even
Yeah.
when you approach something like astrology with a critical eye, it can still open up all these new ways of seeing yourself and the world.
So as we wrap things up, is there like one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
There's this one line from one of the sources we looked at. It said, astrology's greatest power lies in reminding us we are not separate from the cosmos, but reflections of it. And that really stuck with me.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's like this powerful reminder that each of us, we embody this unique expression of the universe.
Yeah.
This cosmic fingerprint that's woven into like the very fabric of existence.
It really makes you look up at the stars differently, doesn't it? They're not just distant points of light anymore. They're like echoes of that same cosmic energy that's flowing through all of us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness, that we're all part of something much, much bigger than ourselves.
Well said. This has been an amazing deep dive, full of thought-provoking ideas and new ways of looking at things. Hopefully, we've given you, our listeners, some food for thought. And hey, maybe next time you're gazing up at the stars, you'll see them in a whole new light. Not just as distant suns and planets, but as echoes of this grand cosmic dance that we're all a part of. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep looking up.